Good afternoon. It's Keina Zontel coming to you on this good Get Woke Wednesday. Welcome to Citizen the Pod. I'm excited to speak to voters, citizens of the world, everyone that's out here just kind of amazed at the current state of affairs. Yesterday, Nikki Haley, our UN ambassador, decided to pull the United States from the UN Human Rights Council, which I found to be very interesting, especially since it was Juneteenth. I'm not sure if all of my listeners are familiar with Juneteenth, but it's basically a day African Americans celebrate full freedom from slavery. So I just want everyone to just kind of keep their minds open. I want everyone to just pay attention to what's going on every day because things are changing quickly. And it's just really clear to me that, this country does not value Black and brown lives. Our reason for pulling out of that council was because the United States, and I'm saying they because I'm not a part of that group, felt that the council was mistreating Israel because of how they felt about how the Israelis were treating the Palestinians. I mean, do your research, get to Googling. If you're not familiar with what's going on the West Bank, the issues with Palestinians and Israel, the importance of the UN Human Rights Council, and Juneteenth. I mean, these are all things that I'm hopeful that the listeners of this pod will want to know more about so they can better engage in that conversation. So today I come to you guys with a heavy heart, but we got work to do and we got things to talk about. So stay tuned. Again, welcome back to Citizen the Pod, and you can follow us on Instagram or Twitter at The Surge 2018, and we'll be talking soon. Welcome back to Citizen the Pod. It's your host, Keina Zontel. Don't forget to leave a voice message on Anchor or a tweet or a DM at the Surge 2018 if you want to add your thoughts, get some questions answered, or give me suggestions on topics that you want to hear. And I'm not going to waste any time introducing one of my favorite people. I'm so excited. He's probably the smartest person I know when it comes to talking politics. My friend Paul is with us today. What's up, hun?
Hey, what's going on? That was a nice introduction.
Well, listen, we go way back. So I get really excited when I get to talk to people who are totally on my wavelength, and I just love hearing from you. What's going on with you? What's new these days?
Uh, busy, busy in the middle of campaign season here in Rochester, New York, but things are going well. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Listen, folks, this is my go-to friend for all things politics, as mentioned before. And if people want to hear from you, hear what you think is important in politics, is there any place on social media you'd like to direct folks to?
I actually try to stay as dark as possible on social media.
Listen, when you're entrenched in the in the political game, you've got to stay dark sometimes.
Yes,
Like you just
yes,
don't need the
absolutely.
people following you.
Yeah, every once in a while I'll post something on Facebook or Twitter, but it's usually directly related to work and it's not necessarily my personal views. Um, Although my personal views align pretty closely, but I kind of took a couple of steps back from social media just to um, basically protect my reputation and my career.
All right. Well, this podcast can get a little dicey. So make sure that you just keep it 100 with my viewers. So viewers, if you want to hear more from Paul, you're going to have to just listen to Anchor, listen to Citizen the Pod, and tune in whenever he's on, because I'm sure this is going to be an awesome and insightful conversation. So let's kind of jump into things. So lately, there have been more and more people who have celebrity status kind of chiming in to this country's political discourse. And that's really not new to folks. I mean, President Reagan was a movie star in Hollywood. We had Sidney Poitier and Lena Horne, working with, Dr. Martin Luther King in the 60s on the civil rights movement. So even though it's not new to the game, we've just seen an emergence of, celebrities chiming into different important topics. I mean, we had Kat taking a knee.
Yep.
And we all know how that panned out. We had the Golden State Warriors refusing to visit the White House last year, I believe. And I know they're probably not going back this year. LeBron stated, like, who wants to go? Like, why do you want to be bothered? And then we have like the legends, John Legend and his wife, who made a really big donation on 45's birthday in his honor to the ACLU. And then you have Kanye wearing a MAGA hat. Like, and I think people just kind of went crazy when they saw that. And that's for good reason. So, I mean, how do you feel about, entertainers injecting themselves into the political discourse? I mean, should they just entertain? How do you feel when people say entertainers should just entertain?
Well, the first, honestly, it's really disrespectful, especially in the Black community, when you understand that many of the people that have built up a platform of influence in the community have been entertainers, and this has gone back now decades and decades. Everyone from someone like an Oprah Winfrey, as you said, to a John Legend or a LeBron James. These are some of the most visible Black folks in the entire country, and so for them not to have the opportunity to use their voice for social good is problematic. And for people to try to silence them, to say, well, you're just an entertainer, it really tries to marginalize them. And specifically, I think we have there's a class aspect to this too,
right?
Saying that people that use their body in order to be successful, that somehow that is less desirable than, for example, the business person that then jumps into politics. You very rarely hear someone say, tell that CEO or tell that whoever. Right. Mark Cuban, for example, he was also a TV star, but he made his billions in investing. You never hear someone say, tell that CEO or that business person or whoever to stay out of politics and to stick to what they do. It's only when it comes to people that use their body that you have this othering that's happening. And as I said, I think there's definitely a class aspect to that. But then there's also just the aspect of you have some folks that will say these people have been given everything in order to succeed. They've been allowed to succeed in this country, and they should just be grateful and shut up and take what they have.
And do you feel like that is something that honestly only happens to Black athletes? I mean, before Bruce Jenner became a woman, I don't remember anyone, telling him to shut up and jump or shut up and run when he was, on speaking tours touting his conservative values. I mean, I just feel like, we saw Laura Ingraham on Fox News try to blast LeBron, but where was she? Well, where was she during the entire 2016 election? Like, you were willing to kind of, roll out the red carpet to the White House for Donald Trump, who, as we all know, had a history of just not being a good person before he became president and not really having a real stance on any issues other than things that were important to him. And now he's 45.
Yeah, I think that there's probably two things there. I think the first one is that is something that has been used more on the right than on the left. And so it probably is directed more towards the Black entertainers, but I think there are white entertainers. I believe the Dixie Chicks during George W. Bush's presidency, there was a similar thing that was being said about them when they were coming out and speaking out about the Bush administration,
Right.
or even Kanye, actually, his comments after Hurricane Katrina. So
Right.
you still have this that this has been going on for a while, but I think the folks on the left aren't as quick to say to, for example, a Ted Nugent, stay out of politics and just keep playing whatever kind of music he does. Not
I
really
don't
sure
even know either.
music.
So I get that
but
might be a sign.
But yeah, so I think that's really a thing on the right to say, stay to your entertainment and stay out of politics. And because the Black entertainers play such a prominent role in Black life in terms of the influencers, it probably seems a little bit more directed to Black entertainers, but I don't think that's just something that's directed at Black entertainers.
Right. So do you think this emergence of entertainment in politics for votes? Because I actually believe that, unfortunately, some political rules that we have were in play when it comes to Trump. For example, during campaigns or before campaigns, elected officials or candidates like to get a lot of exposure because name recognition is important. So the better your name recognition, the better you do, in the ballot booth. So Trump's name recognition, his celebrity status made it easy for him to become a part of the political discourse because he was well known.
Absolutely.
So, that idea of a popularity contest becoming a part of the political conversation. I think it was just easy to vote for Trump because people were it was easy to recognize his name. And quiet as it's kept, he used a manufactured message. I mean, Trump is by design. Steve Bannon, the Koch brothers, if you've done any reading on, what made Donald Trump, it was clear that he was just the right person to carry the message.
Yes.
So, how does that kind of change, how the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is looking at candidates or upcoming candidates?
Yeah, I think it's hard for people that are famous, especially for entertainment, that are entertainers, to jump into that kind of world because you become a polarized figure one way or the other. And as entertainers, I think Michael Jordan had a famous quote one time when there was a very contentious race happening in North Carolina where he's from, and there was this Republican that was just absolutely awful that was on the ballot, and there was a lot of pressure being put on him publicly, people calling him out and saying, you need to take a stance on this race. Your people are suffering here in North Carolina. And his response was, well, Republicans buy shoes too.
Wow. That's interesting.
So
I didn't know this story.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I think, and there was just like a period of time, I think post 70s, 80s, after the civil rights era and then the Black Power movement, after kind of a lot of that died down, there was an era, I think late 80s, 90s into maybe even the early 2000s, where a lot of the Black leading entertainers really stayed away from politics.
Right.
Even thinking of like an Oprah Winfrey, she made her billions, but it wasn't until President Obama's campaign that she actually came out. Before that, she was very well coached and rehearsed, but she would stay out of the political realm. She would have people on sometimes, but she would be really good at hiding her views.
Yeah, she would stay neutral.
Then you could think of someone like even like a Michael Jackson. Remember O.J. Simpson? I mean, I can go down the list. There are a number of and nothing against them. I mean, some people we hope that they don't speak out,
right?
Especially if they're not very knowledgeable about the issues. Obviously, we want everyone to be well educated to have the ability to speak out, but some people are just not the right voices for whatever the movement is of the day. So I'm not saying that everyone should speak out, but there definitely felt like there was a generation of Black entertainers that shied away from taking a stance on public issues. And then I think it hasn't been until maybe the last 10 years or so that it has kind of reemerged, and definitely in the wake of of the recent shootings of unarmed black men,
Right.
and women, and the the Black Lives Matter movement. I think that really, actually, probably since Obama, there's kind of been a little bit of a shift.
Right.
Since Obama was elected in '08, that's probably where we started to see a lot more of black entertainers being activists. But definitely in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, it really caught fire all over. But in terms of, should the parties be looking at entertainers, again, I'll go back to what I said earlier, which is, if it's the right person. I mean, if LeBron James wanted to run for any office in Ohio, I would be very, very happy to help him.
Right.
So there's certain entertainers that they not only have a voice, but their politics is in the right place. Or John Legend, for example. And so I think that the parties absolutely should be on the lookout for those entertainers that could make that jump and have a positive impact. But for the entertainers, I understand the reluctance to get in. Although right now I think it's kind of built into their profiles. So like a John Legend, part of his appeal to certain people is the fact that he seems like a genuine person. He can touch, you can feel him, or you think you can at least. And even if you don't agree, he is so well spoken.
I was gonna say he's totally an intellectual.
Yeah, I mean, he went to University of Penn for his master's. I mean, he knows, he's intelligent, and he can speak about the issues. And so I think people, even if they don't agree 100% with his politics, they respect him as a person. And so I do think that there's a way that these entertainers have managed their brand well enough that some of them could jump into the electoral politics and do well.
Right. So I guess, we've seen like Meek Mill's growth as somewhat of like a quasi activist. A lot of people didn't know much about the criminal justice fight until they heard his story. And I don't even want to say a lot of people. I just want to say white people, because Black people have a real experience when it comes to the criminal justice system and incarceration. Like I don't believe honestly that there is any African Americans who can say that they haven't been touched by the criminal justice system. Like I really can't name one. And hearing his story, which is crazy, just about being a young man, getting his charge, spending 10 years, as a parolee under, supervised surveillance, and how easily it was for him, especially as someone who had been successful, to go right back into the system. And I mean, we've seen this with T.I., who has now become this budding activist, even though I don't think that he necessarily wanted it. And he doesn't have a college degree, and he speaks quite eloquently, which is awesome. So, and we're not, and in no way am I saying that people without college degrees can't speak eloquently. That's crazy. I'm definitely not saying that. I mean,
and LeBron James only graduated from high school. That was the last degree he's received.
Right. And it's really about, if you're always constantly learning, you can always better yourself, so just because you gotten a little older doesn't mean that you can't grow as a person. So I definitely don't want to say that, but we just, it took a celebrity story to get people's attention.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how do we get people's attention? Like, because it's just hard as an organizer or an activist to keep people engaged when they just don't feel connected to the story. How do you do that? Because I know you're out in the streets, you're making things real for folks.
It's hard. If there was an easy answer, I think we would have solved it by now. I think highlighting these stories are important, but the other problem is you get fatigue from people hearing about it all the time. Yeah. And so the trick is, how do you channel that energy into structural change? Because I think once people hear these stories of injustice, and the light is shone on these issues, it's hard for people to look away and to say, this is, I'm okay with this, I'm comfortable with this. For a good example is when these different studies have been done asking Americans what do they think the income um, uh, disparity looks like, and then what do they wish it looked like.
Mm.
And every time they do these studies, even what people think it looks like. So when they ask what they think it should look like, the system looks slightly more meritocratic.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say what it looks like, they think it looks significantly worse. But the reality is the situation is about 10 times worse than people even think it is. And so the issue is that once you start talking about these issues, they die over time. You get a couple of places that have some changes, and then people think, oh, no one's complaining, so the problem is no longer there, or the problem is being remedied, and it isn't. And so it's how to challenge or channel that energy into structural change. I know that there's a movement right now to get progressive district attorneys elected, for example, all across the country. So that is something that's structural change that could actually affect the lives of people who care about the criminal justice system. You have the decriminalization movement that's happening all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
In the state I live in today, I think the top health official under Governor Cuomo just came out with a statement saying that there's no reason, or that the pros outweigh the cons in terms of legalizing marijuana.
Definitely.
So yeah, and so you just have these movements for structural change. I think it just needs to be, it's and as I said, it's hard to channel that energy, and so figuring out ways to connect people who are influencers and movements into, instead of just protesting, because protesting is extremely important.
Mm-hmm.
Highlighting these issues are very important, but then making sure that you have the right organizers on the ground that can then focus that energy into structural changes is the turn that needs to be made.
Right. So we get into like shedding light to issues and criminal justice reform and just the craziness that's kind of happened over the years. So I just found it funny that, 45 has a meeting with Kim Kardashian. He decides that, you know, he feels bad for Alice Johnson, and he decides to grant her clemency, which I think is awesome. So, thank you to Alice Johnson's team and also Kim Kardashian for being a person to make him decide to change. Because I just feel like we all know that he's motivated by good press coverage. So,
Absolutely.
I really felt like his move to grant her clemency had everything to do with, what a Black people are going to like me for now because I do this.
Mm-hmm.
But the flip side of that is his attorney general, Jeff Sessions, last year decided to basically roll back Eric Holder's policy. And that was basically he decided to instruct all 5,000 assistant U.S. attorneys to charge defendants with the most serious crimes carrying the toughest penalties. Basically telling them don't go after minimum sentences, just prosecute everyone to the fullest extent of the law, when we know that these laws in the system is already set up to be unfair. Like, it's, how do you feel about like just that juxtaposition? Like, on one side, Trump will do something because of who he speaks to, which is good for us, but then on the flip side, he's already undermined a lot of criminal justice reform progress that we made in the last 8 years.
Yeah, the I struggle to speak about this because he is a wannabe dictator.
Yes.
And that to me was just him repaying her and Kanye and maybe her dad for speaking positively about him.
Right.
If you say something nice about him, he somehow that affects his policy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just absurd.
It's absurd.
But built into their current administration's policies are blatant issues or blatant examples of structural racism. And that's what that is. That the looking for the harshest way to penalize people, knowing the disparities between black and brown people and white people in the criminal justice system, understanding that charged for the same exact crime, black defendants are way more likely to go to jail, or even just because of poverty, not have the resources to fight a charge, whether or not they are guilty of it. I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of over 95% of all cases never actually go to trial. They see they are they're settled through plea agreements,
Right. That's
and
the
that's
worst.
because you have people that don't have the money to fight this, and you're in jail for 2-3 months, and you can't provide for your family. You lost your job. I mean, at some point, you're just like, just let's get this over with, so I can get back on my life, or get back on with my life.
Right.
And so, because of that gross disparity, we know that this is going to fall hard on people of color and people in poverty. And I mean, you just look at what's going on right now. I mean, the heartbreaking situation with immigration and kids being ripped from their parents' arms. I mean, it's madness. And so I don't even spend much time thinking about the one or two people here and there he pardons, because the structural racism and injustice is appalling.
Yeah, it's a mess. So how do we, if I want to say, like, if entertainers want to get involved in the political process, and I think a lot of times entertainers don't know where to start, because if they're, I'm sure, they their banks, and they know that, and they have the wherewithal to support things and kind of move issues and agendas forward. Like, how do we engage them in the political process, like, the right way, and especially financially? Like, many candidates are just underfunded. The right candidates are usually underfunded. Like, how can we get them to engage in the political process in regards to spending their money?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I wish I had a better answer.
Yeah.
But I think that needs to happen. There needs to be an organization or a group that helps them channel their resources in an area that's going to be beneficial, in movements, or in candidates, in nonprofits that are doing this work. I know that there are a number of organizations around the country that do these advocacy works, and every once in a while you'll have an entertainer that writes them a big check, which is good. But a place where people can go, and kind of like a catch-all where they can be advised on to where to put their energy, where to put their resources for movement building. I don't think, specifically for the Black entertainers, I don't think that such a organization exists right now.
Yeah. And I think
But it should.
go ahead.
I said, but it should.
Yeah. I think on the conservative side, they've pretty much got it, like, wrapped up. Like, they know, which think tanks to support, who they should talk to. I mean, the Koch brothers, which is funny because they were actually against Attorney General Sessions' rollback of Holder's policies on criminal justice, which was kind of interesting for me. And the fact that they spoke out about it was interesting to me. But if you know anything about the Libertarian Party, I mean, they honestly don't believe in police either. So, or like
It's
legit institutions, like, they don't think we should pay
yeah.
taxes. They don't think we should have a police. They just really believe we should have a military, and that's it.
I don't want to give them a pass though, because Jane Meyer, New York Times best-selling author, writer, she has a book called Dark Money that really goes into every aspect of the Koch's foundation and their political arm and everything. And actually, I was listening to another podcast a couple of days ago, and there was an interview about them, and they've done extensive research into why the public doesn't trust them and doesn't like them. And one of the main things that came up was that they were seen as greedy. And so what they've done is they've decided that when there are issues that they feel like they're not strongly opposed to or against, and where they can boost their public profile, they've hired professional public relations firms and some of the best in the world, obviously, people who consult them on how to improve their image. And so a lot of this has been poll tested. They use all the different methods in order to figure out what's going to make them more likable to the general public. And I believe this is one of those times where they could care less. I mean, if you have billions and billions of dollars, no one is stopping you for any drugs. No one, like, those are not issues.
You're right. They wouldn't care less. Right.
And if anything, they could they can position their opposition to criminal justice in the sense that, well, we don't want to pay more taxes to support these people anyway.
Right.
And when you put them in jail, you spend a lot of public money to house them and everything else. And so they're coming at it from, I think, the most morally bankrupt kind of way of looking at the situation. Because my idea is we have an incredible amount of issues in impoverished neighborhoods. And the issue is not that we're putting too much money to house them in jails. I mean, and we know that issue of criminal justice, the number of people in the system that have mental health issues, for example, it's just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so we do need to put public money into these communities, into bettering these communities. They should not be put in prisons, but I don't want to give
them a pass.
No credit for this, because I don't think that they're coming at it from a morally acceptable point of view.
You're right. Oh, wow. Well, thank you for that. So the Koch brothers don't got no stars from me, because I was giving them, clearly me mentioning it on this podcast means I was trying to give them crazies a gold star in the positive direction. I'm taking my gold star back.
Absolutely. Save that gold star.
They're back to being greedy, manipulative, libertarians who don't give a shit about nobody. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's over. So listeners out there, what we kind of want you to take from this podcast is, if you started from the bottom and now you here, don't forget about the bottom. Like, we need you to make a conscious effort to make small donations, even when you don't have it, until you do have it, because the effects of your support towards candidates that support your interests will be positive, and everyone likes to win, and money in politics isn't going anywhere. So, absolutely. It's just, I mean, is there anything last, that you want to say to kind of wrap up when it comes to just entertainers interjecting into our political discourse?
No, but I did want to say thank you so much for having me. Keep kicking ass. I'm so proud of you. Keep up the good work. And I'm sure I'll be seeing you in much brighter lights here very soon.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I care about people. I know that you do the work and you care about, our communities and people in general. And as long as we grow in a positive direction, we're going to be doing big things. So I'm excited to do that. So listeners out there, I'm going to need you to follow me at The Surge 2018 on Twitter and Instagram. Be a part of this movement. If we can send 100,000 troops into war for Iraq and Afghanistan, we can send 100,000 citizens to the polls in November to be about the change that we need. Like, we've got to stop this man. So Paul, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Listeners of the pod, I appreciate you. And be tuned in. Tune into us every Wednesday on Anchor at The Citizen, The Pod, and Lights Out. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Bye.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.